Hi Rogers, can I ask you something?
Shoot.
What does corruption mean?
Well, summarily, corruption is abuse of public power for personal gain or for the benefit of a group to which one owes allegiance. For example, when a public office is abused by an official accepting or soliciting a bribe. By the way, private people can be corrupt too, like bribing police officers to escape fines.
Okay. So exactly how does that concern me?
Well, do you pay taxes?
I guess yeah. What does that have to do with this?
Everything. Because those taxes you pay are supposed to facilitate services you use, like water, electricity, roads construction, medicines in hospitals, name it.
Okay, that is much bigger than I thought. But it can be stopped, right?
Well, yes it can, although it may not be as easy as it sounds. And here is the reason why. Corruption roots are grounded in our country's social, political, economic, bureaucratic traditions and policies.
So, what has kept it going this long? I mean, why don't we stop it?
Well, the main reason why it has been here for so long is because institutions are weak, either as a result of poorly defined ethical standards of public service, weak administrative and financial systems, or ineffective watchdog agencies.
What can we do to stop it?
At a national level, we must focus on strengthening the independence and effectiveness of public institutions that fight corruption. At a personal level, we must commit to never giving a bribe.
I promise I'll never give a bribe.
Well, that's a great decision you have made. Me and you now have to spread this message to all our friends. If we all do our part, corruption will be no more.
This message is brought to you by Alternative Digitalk.
Looking for a pair of shoes? Less Up Stores has a wide range of selection for unisex footwear. We have the best quality of all brands at pocket-friendly prices, and we make deliveries countrywide. Just place your order or reach us on 0772 08 0090. You can also check up at Less Up Stores on all our social media platforms. Less Up, craft your own footprints.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Eight minutes past 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the Hotline Show. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. I'm sitting in for Mr. Abdulatif Mukasa, who's unable to be with us today. I would like to welcome all of you to this edition of the Hotline Show. It's just a very thrilling evening right here. It's Labor Day in Uganda, and it's in that regard that we're going to hold this particular discussion, talking about really what it means, or the evolution of this day, and what does it mean to the various stakeholders, to the various Ugandans that are here, that are employed, that of course get some salary or stipend at the end of the month. As we celebrate Labor Day today, South Korea has thrown protests. Millions of various workers, thousands of workers have flocked the streets of South Korea, and they are showing their, disgruntled or their dissatisfaction with the government, and of course they're saying they need higher pay in that regard. As we speak, as we celebrate Labor Day, there's still fighting that is happening in Sudan. Of course, that is between Ahmed Burhan and, of course, Mohamed Dagalo, who is trying to fight in that regard. What is happening there, we shall be talking about it later on, or you can still follow us on our social media platforms. We are at the Alternative Uganda. You can find all these particular news stories there. But for this edition of the Hotline Show, I have a gentleman who is not new to this particular show. He has been here before. He is from the Uganda People's Congress. That is Mr. Joseph Ochieno. We are going to be talking about various issues, and we're going to be looking at the Labor Day. What does it mean to all of you, and what does it mean to Ugandans? And of course, what can we reflect upon 37 years down the road? We've been celebrating this day under NRM government, but what does it really mean to the people themselves? Have we, found some benefits? As we're speaking today, workers are still decrying thievery in the NSSF. You've had stories there. Workers are still, many young people are still leaving Uganda and traveling to other countries. Of course, in terms of labor force, what does this mean? All that, we shall be discussing it today. You can also join the conversation. We are at Digitalk TV, Facebook, at The Alternative Uganda, still on Facebook. On Twitter, we are at The Alternative Yuga. You can also look for us there. Just send in a direct message. I'll be reading your messages subsequently as we continue with this discussion. Without any further ado, allow me to welcome the guest for the evening today. And we're going to be having this conversation up to 9 p.m. Mr. Ochieno, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you?
I am as well as I could be. Labor Day is a very important day in the lives of workers like myself.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's a privilege to be your guest on this day because I represent the Uganda People's Congress, which is the Workers' Party of Uganda. And I represent Uganda People's Congress, which is the People's Party. But I also represent Uganda People's Congress, which is the party that was founded as the Workers' Party in this country. So I am delighted. But that said, you're absolutely right. When you see what's happening in the Sudan, when you talk about NSSF, something that Uganda People's Congress founded for our workers, and when you see the underlying issues as a result of neoliberalism around the continent, where disputes about pay and conditions of living and cost of living, then it pains people like me who are founded and rooted around political organizations that started in Buganda as a Uganda National Congress, as a political movement that was organized to push for the welfare of the average Ugandan, the average African at the time, because the Bazungu were top privileged, the Asians typically together up there, and the African citizen in his and her country playing second-class fiddle, like NRA has made us play that. And so, looking what is happening today, I reject quite strongly that our monies are being spent on this day by NRA, by Museveni, wasting it after 38 years, as you rightly say, when only the other day, young, beautiful daughters of this country who were medical workers are being whipped by police officers who are paid by our money in the name of workers in this country simply because they're doing their job. So yes, there is a mixed feeling there. But as I said, I am pleased to be here. I hope that at the end of this conversation, young Ugandans out there have got a sense and sensibility and responsibility not only to join Uganda People's Congress, but to join all workers of this country so that we're able to reorganize as people for whom their work, their labor, their sweat, mobilized, organized, put together to serve. But if our labor is part of a profit for a few individuals for which we do not see services in hospitals through our taxes, we do not see services in education, and we see the potholes in the streets of Kampala, and we see our sinking hospitals, and we don't see the possibilities of young, beautiful producers, our camera person here, having hope that from here, whatever she earns, she has got the possibility of making sure that she's also able to rent a house, in the streets of Kampala, because most of the houses that UPC built for the workers of this country were sold by NRA to NRA people. And so Ugandans are in a state in which, on the Workers' Day today, I have no clue where workers are, except Mr. Museveni, who's working for himself, his children, and his grandchildren.
All right. Before we actually delve into that discussion, you even mentioned something about renting a house, an employee being able to rent a house. But that is just the bare minimum, Mr. Ochieno. We need to reach a point where we can build wealth. But that is something we're going to talk about later. I want us to just highlight for us. You talked about UPC. You're from the UPC. And of course, you want to become one of the leaders of this particular party, a candidate. Do you want to just highlight for us what is happening today in that political party before we enter this particular discussion? How is UPC today? Many Ugandans see it as a party that one can say was knocked out, that may not come back. How is it doing?
Uganda People's Congress is unwell. We are sick as a political party because we do not quite clearly have a definitive leader. Yes. The Court of Appeal ruled against Jim McKenna that he's not leader of the party. That is in September 2020. Yeah. The Court of Appeal asked that, therefore, the last elected leader of the party was Olara Tudu. Olara had appointed his deputy, Joseph Bosa, as leader, and Bosa, on his way for medical treatment abroad that he didn't return, had appointed Peter Walubiri. So by implication, therefore, that Walubiri was technically the leader who should, at the time, who should go ahead and organize fresh elections to give UPC members, most of whom are workers, to go and elect a leader of their own choice. Yeah. It's at that stage that I put my name forward, myself, Peter Walubiri, Dan Okello, and Dr. Dixon Opul, put our names forward, and I believe I won those elections. Typical under NRA, people want shortcuts. The electoral process was fudged by a few overzealous people, including Mr. Walubiri. I have the figures, I have got the facts, but because of the irregularities, unfortunately, we went to court very reluctantly, and the matter is in court, and as of today, we are waiting for a determination. This matter should have been determined 4 months ago, but again, thanks to the challenges facing the institutions and organizations in this country, a struggling judiciary, we are still waiting, and I'm hopeful that the matter will be determined and it will be ruled that I'm president of the party. But number two, just very importantly, well, I had also asked that, I have asked that the court issues a permanent injunction against Jim McKenna to stop presenting himself as leader of the party as ruled by the Court of Appeal, and so therefore he should leave the party headquarters, and the party should have a new leader, a new face, a new voice, new sets of values that should be able to focus on rebuilding the party so that together as the Uganda People's Congress, we're able to join the rest of the Ugandan opposition in challenging this toothless NRA regime that is ruling as a military regime for the last 38 years and that has sunk our country and broken the hope of young people in this country.
Okay. We seem to have a problem as Uganda democratic problem. The government mainstream politics, we find that there are irregularities, as many have mentioned and have pointed out over time. There is thievery, there is election malpractice, there is election violence. And now we are seeing it trickle down to political parties such as the UPC, where you are standing here also saying that you were foul-played in the UPC elections. And these have been some of the cases we've had in FDC, we've had them in the political parties. Are we this worse to be that it's trickling down from government, as people say, and it's going to the political parties? Isn't it even going down to the schools? What are we building? What kind of politics are we really building in Uganda?
I think you're raising a very important point. It's very scary, and for me, I sometimes spend sleepless nights, and some of your young viewers particularly might not take it as seriously. I actually sometimes spend sleepless nights thinking about this country, thinking about this party, thinking about my children, thinking about my grandchildren, and thinking about the possibilities of this country post-Museveni. And that is, Obote used to say, the fish rose from the head. Mr. Museveni, a military guy, because he claimed he defeated us. Of course, he didn't. Possibly I needed to go back to the one. Museveni didn't defeat us. And because he's a military guy, we had won the 1980 general elections against NRA and DP. Museveni didn't go to the to court. He went to Luweero. A DP, contested a few seats, and neither here nor there. So anyway, there's no evidence. So we won the 1980 general elections. But any sensible political party with any sense of responsibility, notwithstanding the atrocities Museveni and his friends committed in Luweero against our predominantly Baganda communities after targeting Northerners and Easterners settled in Buganda. These guys need to have been waiting because in 1985. The July coup, it was 6 months to elections. Elections were going to take place. So Museveni needed to have put his program together with his friend Kagame and what they're going to offer to Ugandans in 1985 December. DP needed to put through their programs, including to cry foul and say, you remember we rigged in 1980, now 1985, these are the seats we need to claim back. They need to have done that. They didn't do that because they knew, one, it was not true. Two, their programs were inferior. three UPC was going to win even much more convincing victory in 1985. Do you know what? Because between 1980 and 85, notwithstanding the NRA bandits in Luwero and the NRA bandits throwing bombs in Kampala, by the way, for information, he hadn't been born. You can see how long Museveni has been in power. You know, we had managed to turn around the economy. We had managed to refurbish the hospitals. We had built new so-called third world schools. We had rehabilitated roads from here to Kasese, from here to Fort Portal, from here to Mbarara, including Kabale. Even the Maram Road in Katuna had been well done. It was going to be tarmacked. And in others, our industries had begun roaring. Industrial area Kampala was sensible. Jinja, our national industrial town, was roaring. Agriculture was beaming. Net turnaround in the economy of Uganda had been recorded. According to OECD figures in 1984, Uganda had scored the first rise in standard of living since 1970. So there was no, NRA and DP had no grounds. So as a party of ideas, we've won every contest. We won it in 1962, we won it in 1980. As a party of ideas, we had won the contest with evidence. So in 1971, Amin came with their friends from Israel and others, backed by clubs from DP, and they overthrew our government through the bullet. That is not victory against us. In 1985, DP, NRA, and others, again, connived to overthrow a government in 1985. That is not victory against us.
You paint a picture of a saint as UPC.
We are
There's
not.
some atrocities
We are not.
that the reasons why President Museveni extrajudicial killings, the things that are happening today, by the way, where some
Are they happening today?
Yes, they
Good
are.
man,
I'm
good
trying
man,
to inform
good man,
people
good
as
man.
well.
Yes,
The
yes.
things that are really happening today are the same things that this gentleman said UPC was behind: extrajudicial killings and, of course, arbitrary arrests. The same things, torture. Don't you think maybe you also had a part to play?
Do you read? If you read, you go and read Hansard in Parliament. Read Parliamentary Hansard. You will find no single member of Parliament humiliated and abused by the way NRA has abused parliamentarians whether in the 60s or the 80s. Talk about judicial killings. I don't know which one we can list under UPC government. Talk about what is happening at the moment, a beating of students, invasion of parliament, including by black members and the courts, and then black members in parliament. Those things never happened under UPC. You don't need to ask me. Go and try and do rare records. The UPC scenes, allegedly, are 1966. 1966 was a contest of dispute between central government.
It was a coup.
No, it wasn't. It depends on what you call a coup, unless you attended the Janet Museveni's class as in education, because it would be misleading education and it would be a syllabus from Chankwan's, in which case it would be error. But let me tell you this quite seriously. It wasn't. So 1966...
But you had evaded a sitting president at the time.
Young man, I was trying to tell you. I offered to tell about 1966. So,
Please do.
and I offered to tell you the viewers
Yes, please.
that 1966 was a disagreement between central government and the Kingdom of Buganda. 1966 was something which was initiated by Buganda, not by UPC government. And 1966, the incident in Mengo was not an attack on the palace. It was, because I need to repeat this because it's important, that police officers who went to the palace, were shot at. So the first shots were against, police officers. Armed police responded, and they were shot and killed. The army went there as a third element. So in English expression, even if you use Luganda or Runyaki Fort Portal, Runyaki Fort, yes, attack is preemptive, so it wasn't. So the army went because the situation that had gone out of hand, and had gone out of hand because it was the king's palace, and by virtue of the fact that it was a king and also a president, the response needed to have been of a senior officer level, equivalent of Idi Amin. It's the most regrettable incident UPC government officially takes, and I take that on behalf of Milton Apollo as his permanent spokesperson, because that is one major incident that he regrets. But UPC did not start it, government did not start it. Sir Edward started, registered Sir Edward's book, The Desecration of My Kingdom. It was a fact,
exactly.
you know, the kingdom had arms. See what happened in your Kasese, in your neighborhood of Fort Portal by NRA. No, no sitting government would do that. And in our case, it was not that. It was simply that it was preempted the other side. It was regrettable. That is one incident. The next other incident is Museveni's atrocities in Luwero. It was Museveni's atrocities in Luwero. He lost elections in Nyabusho's in Mbarara. He lost, and it was rejected. So instead of going to Mbarara to courts of law, he went to the bush. They fired the first shot down there, attacked innocent people, and after the army, the next other targeted victims of Mr. Museveni were people of northern and eastern extractions on top of UPC chairperson. So it was a deliberate design by this NRA band in Luwero. So to associate that with anything other than getting Museveni to hold him accountable and responsible for the atrocities and the scars of Luwero is nothing short, of course, of Victor's history. How then you can put anything else under UPC, I don't know. Final thing, of course, because I'm used to these things, they tell us all the time. So-called ministers who were detained in the 60s. Yes, those ministers were planning a coup against the president, Milton Obote. And it's a fact. They are arrested, detained, and taken to Luzira. And Luzira at the time was actually fine Luzira, not the Luzira that these Mabate thieves have gone to attend. And I don't know when the chief Mabate thieves are going to attend, because the chief Mabate thieves start from Museveni's deputy, to Museveni's prime minister, to Museveni's speaker, to Museveni's finance minister. Those are the chief thieves. And then after that, of course, they've got to be supervised by their man, Mr. Museveni. So those thieves should go and taste Luzira. Yeah? Yes, but these particular individuals went to Luzira, and Luzira then was an average of 3.5-star hotel, equivalent to Luzira, under UPC government. No, UPC, we provide decent education, we provide decent health, yeah? We provide decent infrastructure, we provide decent rails, we provide decent air traffic. We make sure our workers are well paid. We provide them with houses. We provide them guarantees for banking. That's why we've been opened up and started Uganda Commercial Bank. We provide them with a guaranteed NSSF. And even when some people get into crime and they go to prison, we provide them with decent Luzira.
That is Mr. Ochieno Joseph, and of course he is elaborating more on that particular issue. But now let's delve into the topical discussion of the day. We are talking about Labor Day. What does it mean to Ugandans, and what does it mean to the workers that every day wake up to try to develop this country and make themselves better as individuals? Mr. Ochieno, as we celebrate Labor Day today, what is this day supposed to mean to the Ugandans out there? People who are going and making money every day, trying to build a country that is better. And what does this day really mean to them?
You know, Labor Day, otherwise also known as Workers' Day, as I said earlier, you know, traces way back from the time, early parts of Industrial Revolution days of the 1700s, 18th century, though, thereabout. It goes way back to that, if you want to go back to the Industrial Revolution, when people then emerged and industry came in and people started formalities of factory work and manufacturing and others. And side by side with people leaving their homes to go and work, meaning present their labor in exchange for some money, the agitation and common sense argument started about questions of fair wages, questions of terms and conditions, living conditions, and fast forward to much later health and safety at work, and speed up to now. I can go back to about 1889 or thereabout, when the international socialist campaign groups, which you can see Labour, UPC being quite happy, you know, formulated 1890 as the first Labour Day, meaning global socialist groups coming around and saying we need to celebrate workers as people who give their labor to generate, you know, a service to nation states. If you then go to the Americas, there was this thing called the Haymarket riot. in the Americans, they tried this. And I'm giving you this background because it's a shame that we see our workers being mistreated in the Middle East. Yeah. We see our workers being mistreated by these NRA guys in Kampala, overzealous guys, whipping, particularly some of our young, beautiful daughters who are doctors, and our young, beautiful wives and girls who are doctors, and our young, beautiful boys who should be the next surgeons to handle Chris Barry Mosi, when he falls sick on his way to Nyabushozi. Yeah?
When all of us fall sick.
Very cheeky, isn't it? So,
yeah.
The campaign for rights for those things I was talking about faced resistance. And so big corporations, some of predominantly conservative governments, started by also not wanting to respond. And at the time, other than those things, workers were beginning to demand for 8-hour working day and 5-day working week. So lest workers, forget, and Ugandans forget, this took blood and sweat. Some people had to speak. Some people had to leave the comfort of their living rooms to cross the other end of Kampala and Tororo, Mbarara, to go and agitate and campaign to create a possibility for somebody being able to work 5 days a week instead of 7, and 8 hours a day, instead of possibly 24, like as the slave that the African has always been made of. So that faced big revolts, and in that Haymarket stuff, once the then American security forces overreacted, workers who were basically radical workers, believed one of them threw a bomb and people died. So this partly is part of the background of that. So when the May Day, Labor Day was instituted, it became a big thing for people, lest, as I said, people forget that it did not come from nowhere. Fast forward, as I gave the background, UPC, for example, as Uganda National Congress, was founded in 1952. Yes. But part of the early 40s, the movement was very much about the African personality, particularly in Buganda, particularly in Weru, and those areas where Ignatius Musazi was, yes, and generally across Uganda, that where we, the average Ugandan persons, if I go and work in a sugar factory, how much is the African paid? Is it paid the same amount with the Asian, and for what amount of work? And what are the terms and conditions? What are the working conditions there? Have I got a possibility of getting promotion? Same kind of issues. You realize that from then on, not only were we talking about as the same working conditions, fair wages, access to agricultural tools and seeds and support to make sure that our coffees and our teas and our cottons are well catered properly over a period of time. Yes. This movement translates into, if you like, a socialist political party when we begin to agitate for independence, because we say, this is our Uganda, this is our coffee, this is our tea. But some dubious NRA-like investors come here and thieve, I use the word thief very deliberately, steal most of the big monies, most of the big profit. Where are we? Hence, then the emergence of Uganda National Congress, a political party in 1952. We're now beginning to push for independence. Not surprising, we pushed, and by 1960-61, yes, the resolve for independence was total. We want to claim our country, we want to guide our country, and an independence, likely enough, when it became the governing political party. I'm giving a very important context. Yes. We consciously, driven by ideology, driven by conscious awareness, and driven by our background, we're saying that this nation state called the Republic of Uganda, what are we going to do? For the average worker in Uganda, and worker meaning from the cleaner to the top surgeon, we will honor the Ugandan worker. And you give the Ugandan worker honor by giving him or her competitive salaries. And by the way, in the event that I'm UPC president tomorrow, and in the event that UPC returns to government, and I'm part of that government, we are going to review very quickly, very urgently, this thing called the minimum working wage.
That's what I wanted to even talk about.
We're going to push very, very quickly for that. And you're also going to push very quickly for working wages. And then you realize that not only then you do in terms of wages, then the worker says, what is my working condition? I was reading some stuff the other day where most of the people who are employed in this country, they're employed without contracts.
Yes.
And then you move from the question of employment contracts. Then you say, hey, what about maternity leave? As part of this day, women, maternity leave was fought for. It was not granted, it was fought for. And by the way, today in Uganda, I don't know how many months are granted. I know a close relative of mine had fantastic students, bless them, the other day. And I know how many few days they got. I know other countries like in Britain, how many months you get. And I know countries mainly in Scandinavia, how you take it up to a year. And now part of the conversation is not maternity leave, it's also about paternity leave, where the father, in terms of access. The workers, today, if there's a conversation we're having, those are the workers' conversations we should be able to have. But beyond that, once the worker has worked, how much does he or she save? Part of a commitment in terms of your savings, what does NSSF do? And when you've got your NSSF money, which has been put down there, is it part of the NRA thieved money that make people build malls? Some of these funny people who boast in town, they look like special heavens, don't you see them? You know, and they're real thieves, and they look like special thieves. Sometimes actually they clear the way because of 2 big cars. No, those cars are your taxes, your money, workers' money. You know, those are the issues. So then from there, the workers on this day, May the 1st, whom are we celebrating? That the person takes their monies to the bank, and the money makes genuine interest. And that also when the person also wants to go and borrow from the bank, like Uganda Commercial Bank that we founded at NRS Sank, Museveni, bring back our Uganda Commercial Bank. We want to know where he took our money. So you bring back our Uganda Commercial Bank. So again, when you, young Mr. Biarohanga, want to go and borrow, you should not go and borrow at 20%. A UPC government would insist that borrowing rate goes to single digit very quickly, because I've said this before. And Mr. Kasai, I think, he was the Minister of Trade at one stage, and there was a debate with him a few years ago, and I was in that debate with him and Uganda Television, they call it UPC, and there was somebody from Kenya Commercial Bank, and I was crying, meaning mourning the death, the killing of Uganda Commercial Bank by them. And then I said, why should the price of money? Now I'm talking to the Ugandan worker today on 1st May. We borrow money, governments borrow money from these big privileged global institutions, sometimes at 0%. Did you know that?
Sure.
And sometimes 1%. Sometimes, even if in the worst case scenario is 2%, yeah? It doesn't go to 4%, 2%. Then you take that money to central bank, Uganda, our central bank, which was last run by my elder brother, Mutebile, who's gone, and whom Museveni can't find another UPC to replace him. So that's how struggling Museveni is. So the workers, teachers, teachers can't teach for Museveni good enough people to become the next governor of the Bank of Uganda. But may my brother Mutebile rest. So Uganda Commercial Bank, Central Bank. Central Bank gives Uganda Commercial Bank that Museveni has sold, money. In this case, okay, there is a Centenary Bank, for argument's sake. Centenary Bank borrows money. From 2%, how much does Central Bank sell to Centenary Bank? I'm talking to workers, by the way.
Yes.
Suppose Centenary Bank buys money from Uganda Commercial Bank, from Central Bank at 5%. What is the justification for you, Biarohanga?
To get it at 18%?
To go and get that money at 15%. What is the justification? If it's not part of theft, Ugandan workers need to demand that interest rates to borrow money is part of the right of an average Ugandan worker. Yeah. And the future UPC government would ensure and will ensure that absolutely happens, Ugandan worker. Because so you're a Ugandan teacher, you work so hard, you earn your 1 million shillings if you're lucky, and your 1 million shillings you save a little bit, and your 1 million shillings you cannot go and borrow at a reasonable competitive rate, to rear chicken like I tried to rear in Nagongira at a reasonable rate. Common sense. So if you can't do that, the state is letting you down. And if that state is an NRA state, wake up and realize that there's an alternative to NRA.
Let me just go back to this minimum wage bill. And Parliament tried to pass it. And when it reached the president also gave his justifications and was suggesting that, hey, this particular law is going to buy investors from coming to invest in Uganda's economy. And he was saying this would be the better option. When you look at his analogy of we need to attract investors, and how best can we attract them when we have a minimum wage bill? Many of them will say, hey, if this employee is going to be getting at least, let's say, $20 a day, I won't be making profits as an investor. When you look at it from the angle of the government and President Museveni, don't you think there is a bit of some justification there in your perspective?
This regime is sick. They steal some people from UPC, but I don't know what economics Museveni studied. Apparently, I'm told he studied economics in Dar es Salaam, didn't he? Allegedly. No, he studied political science and economics and political science. And the other thing is, by and large, me, I did merely A-level economics, but I'm actually quite good. Don't you think so? So no, you don't have to have an economics degree to have this commonsensical thing about it. No. These are guys who are not interested in workers in this country. And Museveni must be held responsible. You know, is he batting? He went to Luwero to bat for so-called dubious investors, Pinetis of this world, or did he go to Luwero, allegedly, because it was even in error, to bat for Ugandans? Governments bat for their citizens. Yes. The investor thing is a nonsense. You don't run a government, you know, unless you're a quisling, unless you're an agent of imperialism, if your job is to run a government to please the rest of the world at the expense of your citizenry. One. Number two, minimum wage is actually a new concept to them. For us in UPC, we're pushing that as early as the days of the Common Man's Charter in the 60s. You see, we've come a long way, young man. You know, as early as that time, we visionary said Ugandan workers deserved, yeah, that. Universal primary education and universal secondary education. We pushed this in the 60s, well before Museveni became a graduate. The guy likes claiming sort of things, you know, in the 60s, you know. Point is this. Competitive economists will tell you that the best economies are economies where workers are sufficiently trained, sufficiently equipped, sufficiently remunerated, and sufficiently motivated. That economy is an economy in which people don't live on stolen money. Part of the sad news that I must say is today I was speaking to a retired civil servant, one of the most powerful citizens of this country, one of the most powerful retired civil servants of this country, long-standing, I'll not mention their names. This man's money, for pension money, the other day went to withdraw the money. Apparently, some dubious young thief stole his money. I'll not go into the details. It's being investigated still. Why? And this man tells me, Joseph, old man told me, Joseph, and I saw this, I think there's some young chap, you know. Why? That is despair. That is poverty. That's unemployment. Unemployment.
Yeah, that
is despair.
Talk about it also.
That's insecurity. You know, that is lawlessness. Yeah? So, back to the minimum wage. In Britain, I'm very lucky that when part of the conversation around minimum wage was taking place in Britain, I was there and I was an active member and player in the Labour Party. I want to tell you that the conservatives, usually conservative-leaning people who are part of dubious big business, the tiny Rolands, friends of the Musevenis, the guys who come in the name of investors, but they want to take trillions and then let the rest of Ugandans just take a little bit off, you know, kind of stuff. Those are the guys who talk about minimum wage, for example, claiming that it destroys business. Because do you know what? Global capital is controlled by a tiny minority of profiteers. In fact, some of them are mafias, cartels. The vast majority of our wealth, our monies, go to those few individuals. If you see how much the top 1%, even in this Uganda, the top 5%, you know, earn and control, versus the majority of ordinary Ugandans, including poor Karamojong, whose iron sheets are stolen. It's actually criminal. You know, some of these guys are very lucky. I nearly went to the seminary, this is official, I nearly went to the seminary in primary 6. And the biggest credit they did for me was that I didn't go to the seminary. because Jesus wanted me to go to Miri and become Ochieno in a different sense. But if I did, I would almost certainly, I know I wouldn't be an average priest. I'm sure I would possibly not be archbishop, and maybe would not be the next pope. But definitely I'll be some average bishop. But whatever the case, I would be have access to Holy Communion. I think I was really saved, because can you imagine holding Holy Communion on a Sunday, and you're going to give it to these funny guys? Of course, Jesus said we should forgive. And the guy's a thief, man. The guy's a thief. And the man's a thief. And thank you, Jesus. Thank you for saving me. My job is now to lobby and campaign for minimum wage. My job is now to campaign for fair wages. My job is to lobby and campaign. By the way, it's not true. High wage economies are best economies. High wage economies is Japan. High wage economy is Norway. High wage economy are Scandinavian countries. They're also high tax economies. And they're also high tax economies that are also high public service economies. Africa remains low wage economies because we have quislings like Museveni who are agents of exploitative foreign agents, and that must change. I am saying it as a leader of Uganda People's Congress. I'm saying, look, America, Japan, Canada, China, come. Let's do business. Let's do business within reason, in partnership. As Clinton says, we need to make sure that we do these things in which there is an element of win-win. And other guys like to talk about win-win. The win-win cannot be win-win for a privileged few in the regime with the privileged so-called investors. What a sensible government does is to say, if ESCOM is, okay, if MTN is coming to Uganda as an investor, okay, MTN terms and conditions, MTN working conditions, MTN taxes, MTN in terms of infrastructure, you're going to make sure that Karamoja has got access, including Kotido, has got access to. And you're going to do it on the basis of the infrastructure need of our country rather than profit motive. And at that stage, they will say, but look, then we have to invest another 100 billion on infrastructure and equipment, and our profit is only 200 billion, particularly if you're paying 10% tax. A sensible government says, yes, you're going to pay only 9% tax then, and the rest is, that is how you cushion these things. That, Mr. Bjarga, do you get it? Yeah, that is how you do it. The question of minimum wage, I know, was in some of these developed economies as recent as 20 years ago, a competitive thing. At the moment, it's a matter of common sense. I know Ugandans have been under wraps by NRA for the last 38 years. So these days, young Ugandans like yourselves, when you meet a young graduate, done BCom, powerful subject, go to BCom, and then he gets a job in the streets of Kampala for 600,000 shillings. They say, Obana Jesus, thank you. And Obana Jesus, thank you for giving me Comrade Museveni. He created it. He did it. Absolute nonsense.
But do you want to suggest that this is intentional to make sure that there is no wage bill to keep people in a certain level? Do you think it's intentionally done, or maybe it's lack of common sense, as you have said?
That is really, really far-fetched. And for me, it would be very tempting for me to say, yes, it's intentional. And by this, almost certainly intentional, yes. Mr. Museveni wants to rule over very...
Because that's the narrative that has been going around. Even when you go to societies, you hear people saying, it's intentional, we have been poverty-stricken, we've been left in poverty because someone has maybe an agenda for themselves. And it has become like a normal phenomenon, people believing that it's normal.
I don't want to go that far,
yes.
And yet, I'm agreeing with you. But I want to say that I hope it's not. Yeah. But I also want to say that in the unlikely event, and this regime is crude, can do anything, so long as they survive, because a regime that takes 15% of our national pot of money to give to themselves in the name of security, and they're cheeky to give only 3% to health. It's a crude, dubious regime. And they shout Nyongo patriotism. Think about it. So these guys can do anything. A regime in which the head of the regime appoints somebody allegedly in the name of the chief of anti-corruption called, what do we call that again? Inspector of Government. But the and the UPC, yeah, we didn't have it. Betty Kamia is my sister-in-law. She's a fantastic lady. But we didn't have that institution. There's no need. You know? So appoints Betty Kamia, creates a commission, huge amount of money poured there, wasted for another, some people, sometimes big cars, you know? And then Betty says, yes, lifestyle audit. Yeah, because Betty knows that an average teacher in this country is really struggling. An average nurse in this country is really struggling. An average doctor in this country is actually struggling. And by the way, under the previous UPC administration, all those people had jobs. Their jobs came with houses. Did you know that, Mr.
Yes,
Brown?
yeah.
Yes.
I've heard of it.
And do you know where these houses went to? You have no clue. Some of the houses that were built in some of these corners of Kampala by the Bugolobi, Bukoto, around Kampala, you know, these days some of these funny guys are controlling them and they're boasting, and some of them are like
They owned them.
Some of them are clubs. Some of them are clubs. Can you imagine? So Museveni economics, that economics, Jesus, I don't want to be part of it. So
Yes.
no. So if then that is the reality about these people, they're commonsensically bound to struggle. The workers within this country are in a terrible state. The worker that cannot depend on his or her wages, it's not surprising that people have to continuously keep on looking for a cut, you know, that is to, and without that cut, they cannot strike a balance between their rent, their travel, their food, their accommodation, and above all, can I say something? Two things. Health. Even if you earn 2 million Uganda shillings, and that's a lot of money for average Ugandans, it's a lot of money. If you earn 2 million Uganda shillings, and you've got 2 children in an average primary school in Kampala, that's not enough.
Yeah.
And even if your accommodation is that house where you pay 250,000 shillings in an average part of Kampala, you know, and that house where the gate overlooks somebody's toilet because there's no planning, NRA, you know, kind of stuff. Eh? Your transportation, your food. Then when the children catch malaria, you can't take them to the local health facility.
Because it's already done. You don't even have money.
You don't have, no, but you have to pay.
Yes.
Now this is the thing. Under the previous UPC administration and the future UPC administration, and by the part of my other commitment before wages, is as my founding parents did for this country in the 60s, is was to have an integrated public health services which is free at the point of entry. So meaning you go to a public health facility, you expect to be seen, to be, you know, examined, to be dispensed with, and you walk home. So here, the average parent of these 2 children, and I've got close families, you know, I'm a grandfather of twins, so yeah, fantastic guys. So these guys fall sick every now and again, you know. So these guys go and then, you know, 600,000 shillings, chip,
Minimum.
gone. This Uganda. So meaning health services has been sunk by these NRA guys. They've sunk people's wages, and they talk about this wage thing. Then you go to education. Me, I used to walk to Nagongara Boys Primary School. The school I walked to, in Nagongara walked, and I came. And I was top grade at primary leaving exams, and I sat in the same class. I keep on repeating this deliberately. Yeah. With the best people in the country who came from Nagasero Primary School. That's my Nagongara in Tororo. Yeah.
Way back in the village.
Yes. And I don't know how much my parents had to struggle. And we went to Miri. I went to Miri because I did so well. I didn't pay school fees because my district paid for my bursaries because of my grade. You know? And then only to come to Makero and I'm being paid to study. And I'm being paid to be given transport to and fro. They call it travel allowance. You know, you come from Fort Portal, you'd get more transport allowance compared to me who comes from Tororo. And then I get boom. And the boom, some of the funny boys will then go ahead and dance in one day. Now, now it's the direct opposite. So you see what I'm saying? 2 million Uganda shillings. There is something criminally wrong that has happened in this country. So that's why the change in this country needs a complete overhaul. And on this Workers' Day, the workers of this country need to wake up that they have been taken absolutely for a ride by Mr. Museveni and his crew. And Mr. Museveni, as the economist, has got no idea, and in my opinion, has got no capacity to turn around this economy, to turn around this country, and turn around the livelihood of the average Ugandan worker. And if the average Ugandan worker usually would be the average peasant, including the other askari, then imagine how he treats somebody who's supposed to be a middle class, a young intern who has just qualified as a middle class by being a doctor. And you whip them like that because they're simply crying to be deployed, crying to be deployed. Yeah. So that sort of is where we are. And then if the average other doctors cannot walk and go and strike, yes, which should be a minimum privilege. And ironically, if legislators, members of parliament, as I said, people who are supposed to be mini national local diplomats, a member of parliament, you don't touch a member of parliament on average anyhow. So this guy just go ahead and whip them in parliament, sends his son's people, you know, these ones in dark glasses, his son's people, special whatever, I don't know, his son's, because the son was in charge, you know, can basically whip legislation in parliament. And then young, beautiful female members of parliament go to walk in the streets of Kampala and you come and beat them. Granted, I was in another debate elsewhere where a fellow panelist who's a former member of parliament said that a certain woman member of parliament was seen whipping a police officer, and I take exception about that it may have been an extreme of the other. As Ochieno, I'm not quite sure would have done that, yeah, but you must put in context the mitigating circumstances, yeah, and the fact that you're human as well, and maybe in law they would even argue, yeah, self-defense. Exactly,
because they were being attacked. But it's time for us to go for a short commercial break. But before we go, I have a gentleman who's watching us from, yeah, Nigeria. He's called Solomon. Solomon says, Ugandan so-called middle class is one medical bill away from abject poverty and one paycheck away from starvation and homelessness. Thank you so much. We shall start on this particular issue. You'll comment about it. But before he does that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go in for a short commercial break. When we come back, we look at this particular issue, and there's also a challenge of building wealth in Uganda. How can someone build from utmost poverty to the higher levels of let's say affluence? So how do we build wealth in this particular country? That and much more is what you're going to be discussing in the next hour of the show. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. I'm still with Mr. Joseph Ochieno from the Uganda People's Conference. Let's break now.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Fellow citizens, following the sequence of events, Uganda seems to be at political crossroads.
I'm not a servant of anybody.
Madam, I know the law.
As such, Alternative Digital brings you the Interface Show with retired Colonel Dr. Kiza Besuje.
Let's keep on the same page on Alternative Digitalk,
as he gives you the alternatives on the transition question, rule of law, human rights and freedom, youth inclusion in governance, economic stagnation, as he confirms.
I'll be always here, Saturday from 10 a.m. in the morning. Be there.
Don't miss the live discussion on the Alternative Uganda, Digitalk TV Facebook pages, and the Alternative Uganda YouTube channel.
Hi Rogers, can I ask you something?
Shoot.
What does corruption mean?
Well, summarily, corruption is abuse of public power for personal gain or for the benefit of a group to which one owes allegiance. For example, when a public office is abused by an official accepting or soliciting a bribe. By the way, private people can be corrupt too, like bribing police officers to escape fines.
Okay. So exactly how does that concern me?
Well, do you pay taxes?
I guess, yeah. What does that have to do with this?
Everything. Because those taxes you pay are supposed to facilitate services you use, like water, electricity, roads construction, medicines in hospitals, name it.
Okay, that is much bigger than I thought. But it can be stopped, right?
Well, yes, it can, although it may not be as easy as it sounds. And here is the reason why. Corruption roots are grounded in our country's social, political, economic, bureaucratic traditions and policies.
So, what has kept it going this long? I mean, why don't we stop it?
Well, the main reason why it has been here for so long is because institutions are weak, either as a result of poorly defined ethical standards of public service, weak administrative and financial systems, or ineffective watchdog agencies.
What can we do to stop it?
At a national level, we must focus on strengthening the independence and effectiveness of public institutions that fight corruption. At a personal level, we must commit to never giving a bribe.
I promise I'll never give a bribe.
Well, that's a great decision you have made. Me and you now have to spread this message to all our friends. If we all do our part, corruption will be no more.
This message is brought to you by Alternative Digitalk.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Welcome back from that short commercial break. This is the Hotline Show. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. It's just 1 minute past 8 p.m. Thank you so much for tuning in. Just a quick correction. The political party is Uganda People's Congress. It's not Uganda People's Conference, as I had first said in the first hour. But we broke off at the point where a gentleman, Solomon, was mentioning something, that this so-called middle class, that we call Uganda's middle class, they are just one medical bill away to utter poverty. In case they chase them from their job today, they will not thrive in that middle class. And this is what Solomon was trying to highlight. How true is this statement?
He's right and 100%, except the definition of middle class. And that's why I use the one middle class. And maybe let me just use this as an opportunity on this Workers' Day to say that middle classes are not defined by necessarily economic ports. They're not necessarily defined, that is a context, and I don't know where the Odoi Tangas are here, lecturers of political science and politics and possibly chiefs of linguistics, because this country also needs that. No. But really primarily, this is about political theory, a concept, middle classes, working classes and ruling classes and so-called ruling elites. In Uganda, they misuse those concepts very, very substantially. First of all, the working class are not necessarily the so-called middle classes, and that's why I said very deliberately. The working classes are actually supposed to be part of the peasantry group. So the working class is generally the law of the law generally, The middle classes are the next stages of people who are normally, by definition, will be doctors, will be normally be lawyers, will be possibly children of and teachers, maybe head teachers, generally, but those are under UPC days. Museveni has sunk them to another class, social class, so it doesn't apply. So generally, when you talk about middle class, what do you talk about? So technically, where it's wrong is that if you're a doctor, a lawyer, and son of a doctor, son of a lawyer, son of a professor, you belong to the middle classes whether you're employed or not. That is basically your class. Your social status at the time notwithstanding. But what is absolutely right about is that people who then claim those status by virtue of accumulation of wealth and positions, and including those people who are basically middle class by right anyway, in many cases do struggle for the reason that I gave. That average wages for average doctors, average lawyers, and average professionals who would others meet this criteria cannot sustain them unless they steal drugs in some cases, or unless they do some of the side business. And I must say, many of those professions are fantastic people who do great jobs. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're teachers, they're accountants, and they're farmers, but they also then are people who are innovatively using through savings or some of the extension from their communities and families, go ahead and run other businesses to complement it. And in many cases, possibly some of those businesses are the ones that pay the school fees and then keep them in some of those poor status. So it's not necessarily all of them who do that. So that's basically the answer. But also tells you, when I was trying to tell you earlier, how NRA sank this republic, that the time when I was at university, other than having a free education, and I say free meaning public education paid for by taxpayers, so Ugandans paid for my education. My father's taxes, thankfully my father was working. I don't know what Museveni's father was doing. You know, my father worked and paid taxes for me, and so with other things, so I don't know how much Museveni's father paid for NSSF and monies that paid for Museveni's school fees. But that's a different point, and I'm saying it for a reason on this Workers' Day. Yes. The idea is this, that we work and pay our taxes, and that our taxes should go and cushion the poorest of the poor. Our taxes should go and be invested in education, invested in health, invested in infrastructure, and invest in agriculture. And in many cases, cushion in the time of COVID, for example, that you say that maybe people work 7 days or maybe 3 days a week, and the rest of the other, even if it's in private sector, the state will pick this pot of money to cushion. That is what governments are like responsible, sensible parents. You know, yes, that's what governments are, you know, in charge of our money. So Mr. Museveni should not continuously put those trillions in the dubious pockets for himself, his family, whom he still flies out for medical treatment. Those monies should cater for the Karamojong people. Those monies should cater for Teso when there's a family. Those monies should cater for the people in Kasese. Those monies once in a while should cater for emergency situations in Luwero. Those monies should actually cater for average people, average workers in the streets of Kampala. And those monies should, in many cases, when ESCOM has particular issues with Umeme that they sold our Uganda electricity generating board, which Uganda People's Congress would bring back into public ownership and manage them and run them on behalf of the people of this country, and profit of that would be plowed back, just like if it is any other thing that has been privatized. So the public will run them. The monies that would be equivalent to profit, like from the National Waters and Sewerage Corporation, that money goes back to be reinvested in public services, rather than the profits and pockets of a privileged few in the boards and dubious foreign investors. But granted, foreign investment is fine. Bring your money, repatriate your profit at a reasonable expense, but not at the expense of whipping Ugandan kids, and not at the expense of making them work for you 24 hours a day, not at the expense of employing child workers, you know, and just as I know Museveni used child soldiers, and not at the expense of our people, where once in a while I go, every other time I go to businesses where there's so-called foreign investors. I even wrote about a particular restaurant where some guy was abusing an average young Ugandan, and they didn't know who I was, and I took it up. So things like that. So to the extent that our average Ugandan workers struggle so much because we have the incapacity to create jobs, and then we take the cream of our beautiful girls to go to be whipped in the Middle East, that is criminal.
You actually talk about something important. Ugandans are working hard, but then the irony is they are saving money in a body that has been marred with a lot of corruption scandals over time. These scandals have not just started this year. We had our latest one this year, but these scandals have been there for a while. From the early 2003, we've had
even earlier.
Ministers, even earlier at the point.
There's a minister in exile.
Yes, she's there.
Do you know what her name is?
No, I don't want to, but let's just talk
about
Mr. Ochieno, how can Ugandans sleep safe when the money they are saving, there is an invisible hand that is taking it on, and there is nobody being charged for that? there's nothing that is really being done that you may say, this is being done to fight this particular issue. Are Ugandans safe?
Why should they allow that?
Do they have a choice?
Yes.
Why does it look like they don't have a choice?
Why do you think they don't have a choice?
You can highlight it as well.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
26. Fantastic age. 36-year-olds downwards are a core of a citizenry that are young, energetic, and whether Museveni likes it or not. In 20 years' time, Museveni will not be there at State House. So these people owe it to themselves and their children, including you, to say no to Mr. Museveni, to say no to anybody in this regime, to say no to any thief, to say no to Pineti, to say no to any public policy that is inconsistent with you, to say no, Ugandans, enough is enough. Uganda People's Congress is guaranteeing us a competitive wage, meaning a living wage, you realize? I've moved it from what they call minimum wage. I am talking competitive. No, I'm talking about a living wage, not minimum, but living. How nice is that? That's a special present to Ugandans. So if we are talking about a living wage, then you say, no, Ugandans deserve what UPC is offering, a living wage. So from today, not only are we going to demand that a minimum wage is compulsory and not granting it is illegal and unacceptable, yeah? But our aspiration is to get the UPC wage called a living wage. And we, the workers of this country, including those who are not workers in this country, who are workers of the future, including those privileged guys who are now living at the expense of their fathers because they inherited, they're not necessarily working, they're just playing golf, you know. We recognize that our children's children will possibly be workers and they need this privilege. We are joining Uganda People's Congress en masse. The Workers' Party, like the Brazilian Workers' Party, which is governing today, by the way, you know, of Lula, radical, to say that no, we claim the Ugandan wealth for Ugandans. What Ugandans need to do is to say, as your question was, could you repeat it again?
So, the question is, what can Ugandans do at this point when that is happening, that money is being taken?
Yeah.
And what exactly should
So what you do, that's what I'm saying. So you build into that. I asked you your question again. Ugandans need to say no. Ugandans need to mobilize. Ugandans need to organize. And on Labor Day, we need to dismantle the existing trade union organizations.
Yeah.
We need to dismantle them.
Are they still even?
I don't know. You are the journalist.
I don't think they are.
Trade union organizations are the voices of the workers. Ugandans need to unionize. Mr. Museveni, Ugandans need to unionize. That every organization must have the requirement to enable workers to organize. Where I worked elsewhere around the world, when it is time for trade union meeting, a day and the shop floor person organizes, in which case, even if it's Centenary Bank, you say in a Monday afternoon between 2 and 3, workers go and meet to organize and talk. That time is granted by the organization. And if it's a group annual meeting where the people who are representatives go from Centenary Building to go to City Square, which NRA has sealed off these days and has really shrunk Ugandans, you know, they go to meet down there and a group of representatives from key organizations meet down there for a whole afternoon. That time is granted by the profit-making organization. Those are workers' rights. Today we are talking on Workers' Day. Workers, I'm teaching you what your responsibility and rights are. So you do that and you demand. If your organization, if it is Sudhir, and he's saying no, Sudhir must be in trouble, partly with the state because it's breaking the law. Yeah. But if Sudhir is conniving with Comrade Kaguta, like sometimes Kaguta connives with some of these funny people, okay? I'm not saying Sudhir is funny, you know? The workers in Sudhir organization join UPC, come to UPC, ring Mr. Ochieno, and we make it a big issue and becomes a campaign issue until dear employees are unionized. There they will be seeking for terms and conditions, working conditions, fair wages, annual leave, how many hours, which hours not to work, then contractual commitments, retirement packages, and all those things, including how much to do savings. Fast forward then, if then these are monies that we save with NSSF, all Ugandans who have made contributions to this, when I come to these programs and I talk NSSF, some of the people, including people whose money is being thieved, think, oh, that's Ochieno, another UPC thing. You know, it's extraordinary. I'm talking on your behalf. I'm talking on your behalf. No, because that's what it's all about. Organized owners of NSSF money have got power if they're organized, power if they're unionized, power to demand, and power to picket. Do you know what picketing is? Picketing means you go and stand in front of Minister of Finance or Minister of Labor, and you say, we're going to picket here, and yes, and make these demands with placards. Granted that the police who don't listen to my brother Chola will not stop you. And if they do, then we sue them. One of the things challenging organization is that possibly even political organizations don't have the capacity to organize and stay focused on message. Today we are on an NSSF, the following day on Mabati, next day on the potholes that the Ochienos picked up, and Spire, thank you, came in around it as now a big issue, and then the following day we're going to look at the women who've been whipped, and then the next other day, which minister is Museveni going to use to replace one who's not going to leave Luzira, you know, kind of stuff. Those are all important issues, but I'm simply saying we need to be having a coordinated manner in which key issues like this on Workers' Day about workers become a daily issue because Ugandans work every day. Because don't forget, Ugandans, including those who till at the peasantry level in Nagongera, those are actually also working, and they're working because the back of those is where we also get our monies, either from coffee or cotton, whatever else that we use for export. But including those tomatoes that these people till, and then they make sure that they help feed the people in Kampala because they're also still working to inject onto the economy. Now,
unity, there's nothing.
Indeed. So, in a way, so really, this thing requires organization. This thing requires, as you call it, unity, but I was going to say, clearly it needs leadership. Okay. At the moment, most of the political organizations are struggling. But I want to say very decisively, very reservedly, that most of the political organizations have got challenges of leadership in terms of clarity of these issues. Unfortunately, the burden of responsibility lies with the Uganda People's Congress, which is the Workers' Party. We are the party of the workers, or what is called the party of the workers, the party of the peasants, the party of the youth, and the party of the women. Because we're ideologically, intrinsically linked and committed to this in terms of our founding, and because we delivered, as I told you, in that way, you realize how jealously I talk about it, because it's part of me, because we built it. Just like, when you make a contribution to my wedding, how much you want it to succeed, to go very well, because you've gotten part down there. But that therefore means that because we are struggling with leadership, internal leadership in UPC, I want to put up my hand to say that we don't have sufficient capacity at the moment to provide the necessary leadership nationally to all the workers of this country. But I'm hoping and praying that younger Ugandans watching, young Ugandans who will watch later, young Ugandans conscious and interested, young Ugandans who know the future is theirs, to know not only in terms of history as we gave about the background of workers' movements and workers' organizations and the important imperative rest of this, but those that also then recognize that this is not a conversation about NSSF today, that if they're 26, the reality is that at 46, they will be very carefully considering how much NSSF money is theirs and whatever. So it's absolutely in their interest that these things get resolved. And so because it's that, It's their interest today at 26 to join Uganda People's Congress, get their membership card, commit, join Uganda People's Congress, not to cushion Ochieno, but go to join Uganda People's Congress, take ownership of it, build in terms of conviction about this thing, marry it into their own selves, take the leadership of Uganda People's Congress as a next step, own it up as Ochieno retires, run with it as a values thing, because this is an ideological thing. As you see, the Socialist Solidarity Conference, then way back in 1890, that is where part of Socialist International, as Uganda People's Congress, lies. So those are our ideological friends, the British Labour Party, you know, the Workers' Party. The British Labour Party's case, they founded by the trade union movements. That's how they founded the early 1990s. That is why they're the political party that would talk, as I told you, they talk minimum wage, they talk a trade union movement, they campaign for minimum wage, they campaign now for living wage, they campaign to tax dubious people who make huge amount of profit, they campaign for investment in public health services, campaign for investment in education, campaign for full employment. Gordon Brown, then Prime Minister, who I was lucky to relate with, you know, said that full employment was no longer an aspiration, but a possibility. And full employment, as you know by definition, I don't want to put on the spot, but Mr. Museveni should know, but he doesn't, you know that full employment is a state in which every person living in that country, in total number of them, who are available, willing and available for work, you know, there equal or more jobs available to them. Yes. Full employment. And those are what we socialists, we social democrats, we guys of the left, we the democratic left, we people who believe we the people, we the Congress, we who do it for all our peoples, and particularly in Uganda, we the Ugandan African, that was we founded on pushing for, we the independence Africans, and we the Pan-Africanists who aspire to be part of the African in Brazil. Brazil is the largest African country outside Africa. Did you know that? Yes. Yes, and Haiti, where are people of African personality? Where are we in terms of conditions? And so we, what is happening to we, our circumstances, we are conditions. And that's why we, not only is it criminal that a regime like Museveni's can export people to go and work as mini slaves in the Middle East, but they work in squalid conditions and we don't have a possibility of guarantee to give them the protection that they need. A sensible UPC government should boast about exporting high quality, high skilled jobs that give bigger returns. Not a young 22-year-old girl who's done a bit of nursing to go and become an expert in cleaning somebody's house.
You talk about
for $200. That is criminal. That is not a commitment that any government should be proud to do so. The nearest government that exports things like that would be a Filipino government that makes a deal with Britain or with Canada, with any other high wage, high income economy that will send our nurses. But you know, you send our nurses and you know our nurses are going to pay, earn a certain amount of money. That's genuine work for them, is contractual, terms and conditions decent. Okay. Those guys repatriate in terms of remittances back to the country, and the country does well. Chinese sent their children to the US to study. They paid for them, and they're stealing technology. I'm saying stealing in a good way. Chinese did that because they're also learning and taking it back to China. What is it that an average Ugandan girl whipped and beaten in the Middle East? I have intervened on behalf of a number, including a few whom I didn't know, but they just reached out to me through social media. And by the way, if the particular issues always reach through to me on social media, that's fine. Including on UPC, but generally reach across to me. I'll be available for us to have conversation.
You talk about a Uganda that is so beautiful, a first world Uganda. Is that really, okay, how many Ochienos are actually there? Do you think it's actually practical? Because it feels like you're painting a beautiful picture that really does not resonate to the real Uganda.
That's worrying to me because I know that's exactly the point. This morning I was talking to a fantastic young student leader from a recent a guild president of a university, and part of the conversation we were having was that this young person says that the problem is that because they were born under NRA and they ate NRA propaganda, and NRA propaganda was sunk onto them, and in some of them Museveni injected them with NRA negative propaganda about other possibilities of Uganda, and they've been blackmailed by NRA, including NRA intelligence, using your tax money. They've been told through intelligence, oh, you cannot have change away from Museveni and his family because there will be terror at Kampala. That is total nonsensical blackmail because that's not true. I told you the Uganda before Museveni was a Uganda in which you went to school, you went to hospital, you went to boarded the train to Kasese, and it was possible. The Uganda before Museveni is Uganda in which you go to Makerere University, as I did, and you get your fees paid for, and you're paid to study. You get a salary, okay?
Yes.
And Uganda before Museveni is a Uganda in which, by the time you finish your final exams at university, you get a job. And the Uganda before Museveni, I met one former Secretary General of the National Union of Students of Uganda, NUSU, that Museveni changed to something in order to sink UPC. You can't sink UPC. UPC is an idea. You can't sink it. Call it to something else. And this guy got...
They now call it UNSA, right?
I don't know. You tell me. But yeah, something like that. But so... This country has really suffered. No wonder you're so pessimistic. No,
it's because we have, you grow in a society and what you see, because we're human beings,
absolutely.
So we learn by imitating. And sometimes it may be wrong, but because you've seen it over time, it becomes to be normal.
And it's a long time.
It starts to become normal.
You're right. You're
like how we are used to toxicity, but it feels normal.
Precisely. And now, can you imagine you're 26, and this man has been in power for 38 years, meaning this man ruled for 12 years before you were born.
Yes.
That's a very long time. That is almost impossible in America. That's impossible. No, it's impossible in America. In Britain, no prime minister in recent times has ruled for 12 years continuously. None. And yet they don't have time limits. So, meaning is, and the longest now, the Conservative Party is going for about 12 years, but with so many other prime ministers in between. Yes. No, it's crude. So, why I'm emphasizing this is I'm trying to tell you that it is possible because it happened and I saw it and I'm its product and I'm, you can call me an elder, but I'm not yet Muse. No, I'm not too. I'm not too tired man. I'm very lucky. Mr. Museveni in trouble. Mr. Museveni for me, by the time I hit 70, it's neither here nor there. I still have time, Mr. Museveni. So we are around, and I'm around to make sure that these young guys who are 26 know an alternative Uganda. So I was saying. So this guy gets 2 jobs. So I was going through University Hall in Makerere, and then I meet this guy in the University Hall Square. I said, hey, Joseph, look, now I've got 2 jobs. He had an offer in Bank of Uganda and had an offer in Ministry of Justice. 2 job offers. So that is, the Ugandan painting is not an impossible Uganda. We have ever had a decent Uganda. I told you we had a Uganda and a UPC administration where in 8 years, I want to give you context. Yes, why these possibilities. You've heard that UPC built 22 hospitals, and I know we keep on talking about it, and sometimes it might be boring, especially to people who don't like beautiful news, yeah?
Yeah.
22 hospitals between 1962 and 1971. Per capita projection is equivalent of about 140 or 150 equivalent hospitals. Now, even if it were actually reduced to 120 per capita today, that is such a big number. Now, we built those hospitals, stocked them, equipped them, staffed them, paid them well, and Ugandans lived decent. In my home in Agongera, a dispensary had an ambulance. In Agongera hospital, in the dispensary, the ambulance, the then driver is called Okoth Namirembe, a guy from, called him Namirembe. I think they call him Namirembe maybe because of his, maybe, I don't know, there's nicknames, a guy from Kireo, now late. Nagongera dispensary. Over the weekend, I was in a radio program. I was in Kaptugang with my good friend Ibrahim Nganda Semuju, fantastic MP, isn't he? So Ibrahim shocked me. It was an air. He's an MP for Kira. For us, it's from Toro, we call it Kira. For you guys call it
Nchira.
Nchira. Yeah? And before Kira. So the whole of Kira, there is no ambulance. No public ambulance. I was shocked. Now,
You want to know the whole of Kampala?
No. I don't want to go there because I'll fall sick.
Yeah,
Do you
because
know
you'll
what?
fall sick,
Because absolutely shocking. So I'm saying, when I was growing up, when I was starting school in 1972-3, Nagongara had an ambulance. Yeah? Nagongara dispensary.
In 1973.
1972-73 had an ambulance. We were from the 60s. Okay, it comes from the 60s. Yeah? Today, Chira, a municipality of Kampala, the richest part of Kampala, yeah, which is actually amongst the richest net wealth givers to the Republic of Uganda. No ambulance.
Yeah.
I am telling you that it doesn't have an ambulance because some of them supported NRA. It hasn't no ambulance because they believed in Museveni's Bush thing. It doesn't have an ambulance because they duped, as best you would say it. They haven't an ambulance because for 36 years they've been too patient. You know the irony? Sometimes I drive and rock a particular pothole in Kampala, and then you see these guys, and so sometimes I open my window. The other day was found one near Golf Course Hotel, and I was telling you that. So do you guys, you're now so impatient just for this journey of 30 seconds. But you've been patient with creating this mess after 37 years. What is wrong with you? What it was have been injected by some. I'm told some of these rulers, including Museveni, I'm told some of them go for juju business.
That is
so maybe,
Mr. Ochieno.
Maybe they do that, but this is extraordinary, isn't it?
Mr. Ochieno Joseph from the Uganda People's Congress, and you're really speaking about pertinent issues, and I hope our viewers out there are actually picking something. And I always like to listen from you because at least I get to learn a thing or two. Now, you've traveled.
Yes,
at least you have seen modern economies, and you've seen how people actually, thrive. Why is it so difficult to build wealth in this country from scratch, to say that you've come from the shambles of inferiority and then you can grow to the great horizons of superiority? But it is close to impossible. You will find that not even more than, let's say, 10% of poor people can really build it to become rich. How did we reach this point?
Young man, how comes I didn't know you were going to ask that question? Fantastic question.
Yeah.
No. I told you that I am the testimony of possibilities in this country. And you're spoiling this conversation earlier by saying I was too much of an optimist. And I was trying to tell you that my dream and vision of the future are possibilities. Yes, my slogan, if you go, and those of you who follow me on Twitter and other places, and I say, this country is possible. This country is possible. All you need to do is to believe in better. You don't have to believe in Ochieno. Just believe in better. This country is possible. Why? As I said, because I saw it. This country is stuck where it is because of NRA. This country is stuck with a ruler who did not come with an agenda for national development. Yes. This country is rooted and stuck with a guy who's ruling for himself, ruling by and for the high command. This country is stuck with somebody who, unlike Kagame, is sometimes very critical about Kagame. You can be critical about Kagame about anything else, and Kagame cannot be critical about UPC because we made them and we found them, and we made them and we made them lead a fantastic life of refugee life here, which you cannot compare with the refugee lives elsewhere, particularly on this continent.
Yes, please.
Mr. Kagame has an idea about Rwanda as a country for the Banyarwanda. The only thing is his vision, his version of Rwanda, his way.
Yeah.
But it's genuinely for Rwanda. Genuinely, no, I'm not saying Museveni. I'm not saying Museveni doesn't have a heart.
I'm saying
okay, forgot.
Okay, continue.
So, Mr. Kagame has an idea about Rwanda and this grand Rwanda. And sometimes I feel very jealous by Rwanda, but in a good way, guys. Yeah? Mr. Museveni has got a view for himself. Mr. Museveni does not have a view about... So in other words, whether Loboa Hospital sinks, there's something which is doing the rounds in social media. Talk about health exhibitions. Again, these guys in social media are doing a fantastic job. Join these things. There is a Benjamin Mkapa Hospital, a new hospital built in Tanzania, at $60 million. $60 million. Fantastic. Side by side of that is a clip doing social media. I mean, doing rounds on social media, and you guys, if you don't follow me on Twitter, it's up to you, yeah? Is Loboa, the criminal thing happening in Loboa, not far from Kampala. And the Loboa hospital is supposed to be $367 million US. And it's stuck. Ugandans, I'm asking you guys, wake up, Ugandans. Uganda is not going to develop under Museveni. Uganda is not going to change radically under Museveni or anybody from NRA. This country needs a new radical turnaround. It needs an alternative leadership. Where I agree is that those of us who are supposed to be providing alternative leadership, either we are struggling within our political organizations because they're supposed to be political, or in many cases, some of us, and we must accept, some of the political leaders, some of us don't have a clue about alternatives. We're alternative leaders, but we don't have a clue about big agenda alternatives. Now, that is a given. But what I'm trying to tell, particularly to you younger Ugandans, the young person I was speaking to this morning, I was telling them, you guys read. Young Ugandans read. Young Ugandans think. Young Ugandans explore the challenge you're giving me in terms of going abroad and other places, looking around. I hosted a young doctor in UK about 18 years ago, and I made sure I took her to Canary Wharf, which is a part of a former derelict land, meaning some ghetto East London, and this place, land was reclaimed, retreated, and a new the city, meaning commercial zone district of London is built. Part of that is an annex of a London Light Railways, trains moving up that go up to the University of East London, which is my new campus of university, where I did my, my master's program. Extraordinary. Those are thinking governments in recent times. They're contemporarily things which are happening today. Young Ugandans, you've got the privilege and advantage of social media. Read. Young Ugandans go onto social media, but also young Ugandans read books. Young Ugandans go beyond Google. Young Ugandans stop listening to funny, dubious music only. Young Ugandans stop going pornography. Young Ugandans stop measuring young, beautiful women in the streets of Kampala by the sizes and nature of their dresses and the sizes of their, the way they're putting up at the top of their neck. Young Ugandans think. Young Ugandans deliberately seek to claim back your country. Young Ugandans have possibilities that this country that God gave us and for which Uganda People's Congress enabled it as building it for God and my country, that this country belongs to all of us. And young Ugandans recognize this country is rich. And young Ugandans recognize that this country, as I said, this country is possible. Recognize that we had planes, aeroplanes in this country, domestic flights including Tororo. The airstrip is now a kraal. Young Ugandans know that the fast trains that will take me from Nagongera to Kampala are 2.5 hours. Now it takes you 2.5 hours to Seta. Mukono is 3 hours to Kampala. Young Ugandans recognize that we built roads. Young Ugandans know that the passenger trains that will take people to commuters around Kampala. Now Kampala is the most polluted city on the African continent. Young Ugandans recognize that the public traffic bus, public meaning Uganda Transport Company, knows some dubious profit-making person that will take you to Luzira. Today it will possibly take you to Chira, Bulindo, and the other end of Netit. Young Ugandans, these are the possibilities I'm telling young Ugandans. I woke up, as I said, from Nagongera, went to Nagongera Boys Primary School, went to Bosoga Komeli, which is by the school. I don't tell the school guys because they're ruling us by force, some of them think no. So the national school is Bosoga Kolemi. So I went to that school and sat in the same class with the best people in that country. Young Ugandans recognize that in 1972, the best people in the country came from Mahanga Primary School in Toro. Mahanga Primary School is one of the new primary schools built in the 60s. Started built as a small township primary school. So those are possibilities. Yes, now, what is my answer to you? My answer to you is that in order for any possibility of those changes to happen, it requires that Nabanja Primary School, Chinoni Primary School, Roshoroza Village Primary School, Kidepo Park Primary School, River Nile Primary School in Arua, Unjero Primary School, where my brother first taught in the 70s, all have possibilities, as does Nakasero, including Shimone that Museveni sold dubiously to other people. But that those schools can then also go ahead and compete with these days. Some of them are called Blessed Primary School, Christ Limited, Uganda Limited for profit, and all the schools which are built using NSSF money.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, please.
Granted, some private schools could be others. I don't want to help them, like, but maybe SETA, whatever, whatever, they are there. So first of all, we need to make sure that those schools can do what they did, meaning you invest in education, you invest in these primary schools, public primary schools, invest in private education. Yes. Young, poor, poorest of the poor. In fact, when we claim back Mabatis, it's not only imprisonment. These guys should be imprisoned. These guys should pay back. These guys should withdraw from parliamentary for parliamentaries. These guys should be withdrawn from public office for life. And these guys' monies should be traced back so that they pay back tenfold. So that those monies go to Karamoja. Beyond building those houses, those monies equip Karamoja schools. That's part of I'm giving the exchequer, I'm giving the treasury ideas of how to make money. So that Karamoja primary schools can have young Karamoja children, like some of these, another criminal thing, children walking the streets in Kampala, you know? And Museveni, who sometimes talks Jesus, and I'm told his family, there's even a church in his family, you know?
The daughter is a pastor.
These guys go through these places, see these people, and these are our Ugandan citizens, and they go to dubious places, including State House, which is our public office, and they talk investors and guarantee investors when you can't feed an average, innocent, poor child in the streets of Kampala. So when that has been done, primary education, those guys will go to secondary education, those guys will go to colleges, those guys will go to universities, those girls, people's lives will change. Meaning, me Ochieno of a fit, close-walking person in Nagongera, today I can meet Museveni. I can meet Museveni, for example. The guy possibly won't meet me naturally, but why don't you call him and arrange for me to have a conversation with him? It would be a fantastic conversation. You will see that I'm at par with him.
The only problem is that when they meet Museveni, there is a way compromise comes in. Won't you be compromised?
In Jesus' name, there is no circumstance under which shall be compromised by Mr.
Because
Museveni.
this day's meeting, President Museveni is also...
Because it depends on what they're meeting for him for. Me, I'm simply trying to say, to meet Museveni, to show decent Ugandans that, you know, Museveni and I can have a conversation at par, and that actually UPC idea is more superior than theirs. That's all I would do. You know?
Hi, Rogers. Can I ask you something?
Shoot.
What does corruption mean?
Well, summarily, corruption is abuse of public power for personal gain or for the benefit of a group to which one owes allegiance. For example, when a public office is abused by an official accepting or soliciting a bribe. By the way, private people can be corrupt too, like bribing police officers to escape fines.
Okay. So exactly how does that concern me?
Well, do you pay taxes?
I guess, yeah. What does that have to do with this?
Everything. Because those taxes you pay are supposed to facilitate services you use, like water, electricity, roads construction, medicines in hospitals, name it.
Okay, that is much bigger than I thought. But it can be stopped, right?
Well, yes it can. Although it may not be as easy as it sounds. And here is the reason why. Corruption roots are grounded in our country's social, political, economic, bureaucratic traditions and policies.
So, what has kept it going this long? I mean, why don't we stop it?
Well, the main reason why it has been here for so long is because institutions are weak, either as a result of poorly defined ethical standards of public service, weak administrative and financial systems, or ineffective watchdog agencies.
What can we do to stop it?
At a national level, we must focus on strengthening the independence and effectiveness of public institutions that fight corruption. At a personal level, we must commit to never giving a bribe.
I promise I'll never give a bribe.
Well, that's a great decision you have made. Me and you now have to spread this message to all our friends. If we all do our part, corruption will be no more.
This message is brought to you by Alternative Digitalk.
Fellow citizens. Following the sequence of events, Uganda seems to be at political crossroads.
I'm not a servant of anybody.
Madam, I know the law.
As such, Alternative Digitalk brings you the Interface Show with retired Colonel Dr. Kiza Besuje.
Let's keep on the same page on Alternative Digitalk,
As he gives you the alternatives on the transition question, rule of law, human rights and freedom, youth inclusion in governance, economic stagnation, as he confirms.
I'll be always here Saturday from 10 a.m. in the morning. Be there.
Don't miss the live discussion on the Alternative Uganda, Digitalk TV Facebook pages, and the Alternative Uganda YouTube channel.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.